Hello and welcome to another video and podcast from Fantasy Football Scout as we help Fantasy Premier League managers prepare for the season and learn some top tips for success as they charge for mini league glory or perhaps even win the whole game itself. Today we are looking at the common mistakes that FPL managers make and how they can be avoided. No matter how well we think we have done preparing for a new season, each year we get something or indeed many things wrong. Wrong player, wrong team, being backed, not thinking clearly enough, mistakes happen and errors creep in. Here I'll run through 5 of the most common blunders we are all guilty of and how we can avoid them. So I've got a number of top 10k and top 5k finishes, even finished in the top 1k once, and so I've done pretty well in a number of seasons, but in other seasons not so well. So I've made a number of errors, and I hope each year I can learn from them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But these are 5 of the common mistakes that I make and everyone makes at some point during the season. So before we move on to look at those, I just wanted to give a plug for the Fantasy Football Scout members area, full of useful information to help you avoid making those common FPL mistakes. Looking at the season ticker, for example, to help with planning, which is something we'll talk about in a sec, and also full of up-to-date information. So you can perhaps change strategy if you are able to do so. So without further ado, let's have a look at these mistakes. I'm going to put all 5 up on the screen just so you sort of familiarise yourself with them, and then I'll go through each one in turn. So hopefully it won't take too long, and hopefully we can take on board these mistakes and hopefully avoid them. So these are the top 5 that I think that a lot of managers make. I certainly make them from time to time as well. The first one is not planning. So how many times has someone said they've got the perfect team in game week 1 perhaps, or just after a wild card? All your players, they play top teams, they play they play for top teams, they play minnows at home, they're sure to get lots of points. But how about next week when they're perhaps all away? And how about in 4 weeks' time when the fixtures turn and they're suddenly facing fellow top sides, or perhaps you've got too many players with from so-called minnows from the promoted sides, for example. So with only a few transfers each month, it pays to plan and look for players. So each of your free transfers each week, how can you use them? And to navigate that strong run of fixtures, to really plan ahead and get that get a great game week every week, not just in one game week. There's lots of tools available for this. We've got FPL Plan that we're linked in with at Fantasy Football Scout. The Rate My Team tool as well in the members area. That's good. You can look at the top scoring predicted players, top predicted scores each week. So you can plan there. So you can look at, say it's game week 5. You can look ahead to game week 10. Oh, they're meant to be the top 15 scoring players that week. Do I own any of them? I don't. It's about time I use my transfers to perhaps get them and to plan ahead. I remember I've done that. I think Sionchu at Leicester was one of the weirdest planning aheads I did. I think I wildcarded fairly early that season. Leicester had terrible fixtures, but they did have great fixtures in about 10 game weeks time. So I just got Sionchu on, just parked him on my bench because he was cheap. And then he ended up doing quite well, ended up scoring. When his good fixture run came along, he was a must-have player to own, but he was already in my side, so I could use that transfer elsewhere because I'd already planned ahead for that. I just as an example, you can do it much better planning ahead, looking at captaincy. So say Haaland's the best captain for a while, but say he's missing a fixture. Well, you want to plan ahead for that. Do you have an alternative captain for that fixture? And so you've really got to look at planning ahead. And that is a common mistake that too many make, is avoiding that planning and not looking ahead too much. So your Bible in avoiding this is a season ticker. So Fantasy Football Scout, we've got a season ticker on the homepage members can have a look at a more detailed version of that as well. Sort by difficulty, and there you can look at various fixtures. So for example, we're looking at the 23-24 season, going ahead to game week 1. We're recording this game week 1. Chelsea have a pretty tough fixture against Liverpool, but then they play West Ham, and then from game week 3 for the next 5 or 6 game weeks, they've got great fixtures. So a bit of planning ahead might involve either just starting with a Chelsea player or having one on the bench, or at least having a plan to getting one in game weeks 2 and 3. And that happens all throughout the season with all sorts of teams. Liverpool might have a tough fixture, so you avoid them. But then 4 or 5 game weeks time, they've got great fixture run. Why not plan ahead for that? Not planning means hits get taken, means transfers build up. Your free transfers are gone. You've got to take hits, and you're sort of scrabbling around to get the perfect team each week. Where, of course, a bit of planning, you can probably just do that just from the off. And that leads on to the second one about wasting chips. And I put sort of wasting hits is involved with that. It's always best not to take too many hits. Perfect planning or good planning will avoid the need to take hits, because you don't need to scrabble around to make sure you're getting those players in, because you've already got them. They were sitting on the bench, or you've got money in the bank to get them. Wasting chips is another one. So, I mean, part of understanding FPL is that it's not a 1 week game. And a lot of people think it's a 1 week game. That goes in with the not planning. So a number of your players might have good fixtures 1 week, maybe early on in a single game week, so not a double game week when teams play twice. And it can be tempting to use a chip there. So we've got a number of chips. We've got 2 wildcards, and wildcards are the most powerful. One has to be used before game week 20, one afterwards. There's a triple captain chip, there's a free hits chip, and a bench boost chip, and they all do pretty much what they say. So part of planning is understanding how these can be used within that season, within that 38 game weeks, and how those chips can best be used. Is the best use of a triple captain chip on a player you've got with a favourable fixture in game week 7, or in game week 33, for example, when they play twice, when you get quadruple points, not just double points for that captain? Is that better? And you've got to look at that. So you can get maybe 10, 20, 30, maybe even more extra points by using these chips wisely throughout the season. So the best time to use a triple captain, a bench boost, a free hit, and second wildcard is usually around planning for double game weeks. And these are when, due to early postponements, players play twice in a week. So a captain's points are doubled, as I mentioned. So, arguably should be played then. And use chips with each other as well. So not just use them then, but use them so they work for each other as well. So, for example, using a wild card, your second wild card, to plan for using a bench boost and a triple captain in upcoming nearby double game weeks. So you're well planned for that. You're well set up. But there's a blank game week. So we talked about fixtures being postponed. Usually it's because of a cup match. So, for example, we already know there's one blank game week for those teams and their opponents in the League Cup final in February. We know that every year. There's a blank game week then. If you look at that, if you can navigate that with just a transfer, not a problem. If suddenly you've got 6, 7, 8, 9 players out for some reason, then use your free chip to navigate that. Don't just do it because you want to get a good team one particular week. Use that because you can use that to navigate those double game weeks. Use those powerful free hit, wild card, triple captaincy chips to maximize points in double game weeks, and perhaps use a free hit to maximize points in a blank game week. You could be planned. Your planning and the way that the fixtures roll could mean that an actual fact, a free hit might be, you don't need to use a free hit chip in a blank game week. If so, great. You can use that to great effect in a double game week, for example. So you can field not just 11 players that are playing twice, but you can field the best 11 players that are playing twice because you've got free reign, free hit chip. those who make the common mistake of using those chips early on in the season, before all these lucrative game weeks come around towards the end of the season, that's a common mistake that gets made each time. It's a common mistake that season managers like me love to see, because it means I've got an advantage. So avoid letting people like me have an advantage, and save those chips, and use them together and use them well. So I think that's a good, I think that's a good a tip there. And I also mentioned about the League Cup final in February. We know a lot of these things. We know that teams involved in that and their opponents will miss that game in February. We know that they're going to be rearranged later on. Same for the FA Cup, for the quarterfinals, semi-finals, for those later stages. The teams involved will miss a fixture and it will be arranged later, as well as their opponents. So a common mistake, just to sum up there, is not strategically using chips together and using them early in the season in normal game weeks. Big mistake, easily rectified, easily done. And it's all part of planning as well. Third one, being stubborn. Too often FPL managers, particularly those that have been playing a long time like me, are very stubborn in their ways. This is the way I've always done it. I've always played 3-4-3 and I never go there. I've always benched. I've always avoided benching a good defender. Play, no matter what the game week or whatever. Everyone's got their own rules and they go by them. But stubbornness really is the curse of FPL managers. Those who are convinced their strategy, their player pick and transfer is the best. But when it goes wrong, it can be difficult to rectify. If you're so stuck in your ways, it's difficult to know how you can change and evolve. I always start by assuming I'm wrong. And how can I correct that quickly? If I am right, that's great. It's party time. But if not, and I'm probably not right, because we're dealing with a game with a number of dozens of players, and on the pitch at one time anything can happen. You've got to expect the unexpected. So expect something to go wrong, work out how you're going to correct it, and that means being open, not being stubborn, being open to others' opinions, open to new information that's coming, open to changing your mind, and not being so stuck in your ways. But that leads on to the sorry about that. That leads on to the fourth common mistake, which is taking in too much noise. So stubbornness really is the curse of FPL managers, but so is being too open. And the reason I say that now, when I first started many years ago, there were sorry, I'm just going to turn my phone off now just to make sure it doesn't interrupt us again. When I first started playing, there was about 2 million managers. There was the Fantasy Football Scout forum, a couple of others, very little social media, certainly very little FPL social media around. But now look at it. We've got 11 million users each year. Countless videos, podcasts, content, fantastic Twitter threads, not so fantastic Twitter threads. And you've got lots and lots of information and opinions about the game. And it can be kind of very... just too much. And one thing for me, I had a health complication a few years back where I had a bleed in my brain, and that's made me since then. I look for simple things. I don't like things to be too complicated. And I look at some people on social media, and it's almost like there's too much information they're gathering in. Oh, this poster said this one said this. What about this? The problem with that, the way to deal with this common mistake is to just cut out the noise. So how do you do that? It sounds simple, but how do you do that? So it's follow those who post information that's backed up by solid evidence. They make an opinion, but they back it up with evidence. So they might be wrong, but at least they've got some clout to their opinion. They've got well argued content that it doesn't really dictate to managers. I hate those sorts of posts where say, this is the way you should do this is the transfer you should make, and that's quite dangerous because they're probably being quite stubborn. And what you should do, is follow the advice, I think, that offers a range of opinions. Say this is a useful way of looking at the season. Someone who says this will be a bad season for Chelsea, they're awful. I mean, perhaps some people who are fans of teams, their rivals might wish that, but you can't categorically say that. And by the same token, you say Chelsea will have a great season. You can't categorically say that, but it's good to offer a range of opinions about it and follow those that don't dictate to managers and don't prescribe how you should do something. You should advise and offer alternatives and say, well, this is the way, this is the advice I'm offering, but there is alternatives, and that's the best advice that I like to follow as well. So as a result, for example, on things like Twitter, now called X, you use sort of groups in there as well. So when you get advice, so you don't get thousands of advice. You've got a fantasy football group, for example, would say 20 very trusted people that you want to get advice from. Hopefully from Fantasy Football Scout is amongst those with the articles there. But you're getting that sort of concentrated good advice. And so many content creators, not just the most popular ones, but also ones that aren't so popular as well, but they're very good. The content they produce is absolutely fantastic. And it's not only just well presented, but the content of it as well. And it's fairly easy to find those out that are just spouting opinion, not backed up by evidence, and those that aren't. But do cherry pick. Do cherry pick the content that you follow and cut out that noise. It's really important. And linked into this really is an attitude about finding your own voice, really. So this isn't a mistake. This is just something I'm sort of adding in here as well. So for example, I'm quite a boring manager. So I tend to get good players from good teams and don't take too many risks. And that suits my style of play. So I've tried being a sort of a more risk-taking manager, and it just doesn't work for me. But it can be great for some other managers. It suits their style. So find your style, have a think about what your style is, and pick advice that corresponds with that as well and improves that style as well. So similar managers or perhaps different managers, but look at it within the context of your own style. How can that information improve the way I play that game? Because there's no point following advice saying, take those risks. Don't captain Haaland, captain this other player. There's no point keep following that advice. Because if it doesn't suit your style of play, because you might want to captain Haaland all the time, so you can perhaps take it on board, but you don't want to let it influence you too much as well. So it's quite tricky. It's a tricky balancing act to have, and perhaps it's advice in general to deal with the proliferation of content for all sorts of things at the moment, especially on social media. And this leads on to the final mistake, really, which is panicking. So it's been a bad game week. You haven't planned. You've wasted your chips. You're stubborn. But then you rectify being stubborn by being open-minded. But then you discover there's too much noise to take in. And so it's really difficult. And all of this is going on. And so it's time to take a break, I think. And panicking is part of it. So ways to avoid that panic. So if you get 20 points, I've had this. I had 3 game weeks in a row where I got about 20 points. I plummeted from a good rank to, I don't know, 4 million or something. Plummeted down the rankings. What do you do? And at that time, I panicked. And what do? You start taking hits. You start chasing last week's points, desperate to get the points that player got last week. You fail to plan. You waste your chips. It becomes this vicious circle of the first few mistakes. Panicking creates, you start doing them again. So it often makes it worse. The best thing I've done, and when I had this season where I did panic, I got these terrible scores, panicked, and then I turned it around. And I turned it around by simply walking away from the computer, from FPL, but not giving up, walking away that week, coming back to it before deadline. Right, based on the information I have got, what transfer can I make? Not let it consume your week. just make that transfer. I think in that case, I think Harry Kane had got injured and Dele Alli was stepping up in his place, and he did indeed that season. And I got him in, and that was it. Got him in, closed the computer, listened or watched the games, and there you go. That's it. And I didn't panic. I didn't take hits, and soon I saw that my rank slowly creeping up, getting better and better scores. And in the end, I finished well within the top 100k that season from being quite well out, about 4 million. I consider that a good achievement. But panicking didn't help me. Avoiding panicking did. So by avoiding that, that leads on to another thing within panicking, which is making early transfers. Yes, they can work out, but I try and avoid making early transfers. So it looks like a player may move in price, so it can be tempted to make a move early. But what if that player then has a Champions League game match before deadline, or another development emerges, perhaps a ban or an injury to one of your other players? So making a move near to deadline gives you an advantage, and that advantage is information. So watch Team News with myself and Neil every Friday, Fantasy Football Scouts YouTube channel. Watch that, get that information from all the press conferences. Use that to make a considered opinion rather than an early rushed one, which is based on a panic or a knee-jerk reaction to a very poor weekend before. Sometimes you might be priced out of a move early, and I have made early moves if the player is going up in price and I haven't got any other money. That's it, and I desperately do want that player. I've made that move, and of course that can work when you have no choice. But there are always alternatives, and I try and avoid that as best I can. Sometimes you can't, but it's best to do that. And I think all of those things avoid panicking. So to recap. Not planning, wasting chips, being stubborn, then taking in too much noise. You can see the middle ground of those two, and then panicking when it all goes wrong. And these, I think, are the common mistakes. So if you can rectify all of these, I think you'll get a good score. I think you'll get a good rank, and you'll beat your mini league rivals. Because this is, I think, the basics of it really. Picking the right players and making the consistent transfers and using the chips over those 38 game weeks, that can take a bit of luck, a bit more skill, and a bit more sort of keeping an eye on the information. But I do think avoiding these 5 FPL mistakes will be very important to having a good season. Thanks a lot for listening to me and for watching me. Just a final reminder, do press that like button if you like this video, and do subscribe if you're not already to our YouTube channel, and also wherever you get your podcast from as well. It does will help you keep up to date with all our latest content, and hopefully it's not too much noise for you to add in for there. Don't be stubborn. Do press that like button, and don't panic. Have a good season, and all the best. See you soon.